For this episode of the Books and Parchments podcast, we're continuing to bring to you the book, Nehemiah, Restoring the Testimony of God, by Kaung. We were given permission by Christian Fellowship Publishers to produce this entire audiobook, so be sure to catch each episode in its right order. Here is Chapter 6, Spiritual Leadership. Nehemiah 2, verses 11 through 18. And I came to Jerusalem, and was there 3 days, and I arose in the night, I and some few men with me, but I told no man what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. And there was no beast with me, except the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night by the valley gate, even toward the jackal fountain, and to the dung gate, and I viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were in ruins, and its gates were consumed with fire. And I went on to the fountain gate, and to the king's pool, and there was no place for the beast under me to pass. And I went up in the night through the valley, and viewed the wall, and turned back and entered by the valley gate, and returned. And the rulers did not know whither I went, or what I did, for I had not as yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work. And I said to them, Ye see the distress that we are in, that Jerusalem lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Come, let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. And I told them of the hand of my God, which had been good upon me, as also of the king's words, which he had said unto me. And they said, Let us rise up and build. Then they strengthened their hands for the good work. For 3 days Nehemiah did nothing. Then on the third night he rose up secretly. With only a few followers, they went out in the night without telling anybody. He did not tell the Jews, not even the priests or the rulers, the princes. He told nobody what he was doing. He went out to view the conditions of the wall and measure it. Brothers and sisters, in the night, seeing the ruins of the wall, it must have been desolate. It was so desolate. It was so very disheartening to see all the breaches there, the walls in ruins, and the gates burned. But he went through the whole area to see it. He did not tell anyone what God had put in his heart. He just did it by himself. After the initial conflict experience, this is the second experience you have in setting out to rebuild the wall. Now, what does this experience mean? Nehemiah heard from his brother Hananiah and others who came back from Jerusalem. He heard of the affliction, of the reproach, of the walls being in ruins, of the gates being burned. And, more or less, you have heard, by reports, of the ruin of the city, the testimony of the church in our time. Everyone today who has any concern for the conditions of God's people has heard these things. It is nothing strange. All who have a heart and a little concern about the condition of God's people cannot fail but have heard that we are scattered, divided, with no separation, no wall, and no protection. We are exposed to the attacks of the enemy. We are weak, and everybody knows it. But there is a difference between knowing about the conditions and quietly measuring them in the night. We all know that God's people today are not united one with another, and this is not normal. We all know that and probably talk about it, and the trouble is, we talk too much. Nehemiah did not say anything. He did not talk about the conditions. If you are burdened, you cannot talk. If you can talk so freely, or may I put it this way, if you can gossip about the thing, you are not deeply burdened. Nehemiah did not say anything to anybody for 3 days. Only in the night did he go out to view the ruins. As he viewed the ruins, God began to form in him a plan for the rebuilding of the wall. What does it mean for us today? In a very general way, everybody knows that God's people are not what they should be. Everybody knows it, and many are talking about it. Yet nothing is done about it. What needs to happen is, without talking to anybody, in the secret of the night, go to the Lord. Bring the conditions of God's people before him and seek to know what he wants to do. That's what we need. We will end up seeing an even more desolate picture than we have heard. To see it and to hear about it are different. Seeing the city in ruins in the night under the moonlight is frightening. But brothers and sisters, as we bring God's people before him in prayer, and we don't talk to anybody, but only go to the Lord, bearing the conditions of his people before him, we will see it is more desolate than we had heard. And yet at the same time, God will give us a plan as to how to fill the breaches. Discernment is necessary for ministry. If we do not see, we cannot help. We need discernment. We need to see a situation and see it through. The problem today is that there is a lack of spiritual discernment among God's people. Even though we say we have seen it, actually we just heard about it, that's all. We haven't seen it. How we need to go before the Lord and see everything with God's eyes. And what you see will kill you, but thank God that since you have seen it before God, you can minister to the need. Spiritual discernment is the first step to spiritual ministry. Again, I want to say, discernment is not the basis of fellowship, but discernment is the basis of ministry. You cannot base fellowship on discernment, because if you base fellowship on discernment, it will break the fellowship. Suppose God has shown you something more than your brethren, and you try to base your fellowship with your brethren on what God has shown you. You won't have fellowship. Fellowship is based on life and on love. But discernment is necessary, not for criticizing your brothers and sisters, but for ministering to your brothers and sisters. And that's what Nehemiah did. He had to know exactly where the breaches were. He had to know exactly where the gates that were burned were located. He had to know every situation as it was. There had to be no pretense, no hiding. In bareness, he had to see these things. And when he saw them, God showed him what to do. Brothers and sisters, what we need today are people who have vision and discernment. We need to have vision of what God wants to do, and we need to have discernment to see what is actually taking place. This is very much lacking today. Lots of good things are going on, but when you come to the root of them, you find out that everything is on the surface and there is a lack of vision, the vision of the wall. There is not only a lack of vision, but also a lack of discernment of the breaches of the wall. These two things are not contradictory. They are one. On the one hand, we need to see God's purpose. On the other hand, we need to be acquainted with the real situation on earth. These two things will create in us a work that is of God. And this is how Nehemiah started the work. Then the next morning, Nehemiah gathered the princes, the rulers, the Levites, the remnant, and all the people. He gathered them together and began to share his burden with them. He told them, "You see that the city lies in ruin because you live here. You know it, but nothing is done. Everybody is complaining, but nothing is done. Let us rebuild the wall." And he told them of the good hand of the Lord that was with him. After encouraging them, they all said, "Let's rise up and build." So they started to build. Brothers and sisters, this is spiritual leadership. What is leadership? A leader is one who has seen something first, who has been given a burden from the Lord first. Then after he has seen and received the burden, he shares it with others. He will not be one who does it all. That is not spiritual leadership. A spiritual leader, on the one hand, sees first, yet on the other hand, he can share what he has seen with God's people and bring them to do the work together. Now that is spiritual leadership. Some people can only do things by themselves. That is not leadership. Leadership is the ability to inspire people to do it. He has to set an example, that's true, but he is not the one who does it all. He can bring others to share the burden, to catch the burden. He can impart his burden to other people and inspire them to join in the work of God. Now that is spiritual leadership. This is not something that you can manufacture. This is not something that you can arrange. This is something that has to come out of vision and burden. This is something that has to come from God. And when God raises up leaders like that, who can share his burden and are able to lead the people together in the work of God, thank God. There you have leadership. This is very necessary for the building of the city, that is, the life of God's people together. So through Nehemiah's spiritual leadership, the people rose up and started to build. You've been listening to Nehemiah by Stephen Kaung. For more on this book and other books by Stephen Kaung, you can visit our website, booksandparchments.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram at Books and Parchments. May the Lord encourage you and be encouraged by you.